Now we're moving on to a rectangular prism. Well, what is a rectangular prism? A rectangular prism starts with a rectangle and then it builds it into 3 dimensions. So we first start with a length and a width, and if we move that and add a 3rd dimension, in this case we're going to call it height because we're going to flip it over, then we have a rectangular prism. And rectangular prisms show up everywhere, from microwaves to cereal boxes, anything that has the shape of a rectangle but in 3 dimensions. Now, in terms of figuring out the area, what we actually call the surface area of a rectangular prism, we have to figure out how many faces we have and what the area of each face is. So we have a rectangular prism here. We're going to start with the bottom over here. Well, we know that this would be called our length and this would be called our width right over here. So I'm going to redraw that shape over here in the same way that we see it, knowing that even though it looks like this, it's actually a rectangle. And we have L and we have W. And we know the area for that shape would be L times W, or simply LW. Now, there is a second identical shape that would be the ceiling in this case. So we have 2 of these. So the area of both of these would be 2 times L times W. Now I'd like to point out that when you have a number beside a variable, which is a letter, or a letter beside a letter, there is a silent multiplication sign there. So therefore, we don't actually write those in so it looks cleaner. But it's very important to remember that those multiplication signs are there. So 2LW means 2 times L times W. That's our top and our bottom. Let's look at our back wall now, here. And then this would be considered our front wall. And I'm going to draw that over here. Now, we have 2 of them, so we're multiplying by 2. What are the dimensions going to be? Well, we've got L, but what's this one going to be? Well, we're going to call that H because it has a height. So we have length on this dimension and we have height on this dimension. So my area will be 2 times L times H. Now we've got 4 faces covered, and in red, I'm going to do our side walls. There's 1, there's 2, and I'm going to draw them down here. These side walls have a W on the bottom and they have an H on the side. So the area will be 2, because we have 2 of them, 1, 2, and then W times H. Now, if we want the area of all of these faces, all 6, we simply need to add all of these together. So we have 2LW plus 2LH plus 2WH. There are 2 important things you need to remember. First of all, you need to identify what the length, width, and height are for the rectangular prism, because you're going to be plugging those in. The second thing is to recognize that what happens here is multiplication. Multiplication and multiplication. Whereas over here, we are adding. Many, many times students will mix these up. They might end up adding inside here or multiplying over here, and we can't be doing that. So here's that same example, but this time we have measurements. So the first thing we're going to do is identify our length, our width, and our height. Well, our length is going to be 15 centimeters, our width is going to be 10, and that leaves 8 for our height. First thing we're going to do is start out with our formula. Surface area equals 2LW plus 2LH plus 2WH. Next thing we're going to do is what I call the work. This is where we're going to substitute all of these values anywhere we see LW, LH, and WH. Now I'm going to add brackets here because I find that it gets quite messy, and if you don't have brackets, you're going to be multiplying where you should be adding and adding where you should be multiplying, which of course will give you the incorrect answer. So let's start here. 2 times L, which is 15, times W, which is 10, plus, in brackets, 2 times L, which is 15, times H this time, which is 8, and then plus our final one, 2 times W, which is 10, times H, which is 8. Some people will kind of do this all in their head or do it with a calculator and then go right to the final answer. I don't recommend that. This is a situation where you will often get what we call a clerical error. That's simply a silly mistake that if you took your time to do it properly, you could avoid. So let's go one at a time. 2 times 15 is 30, times 10 is 300. 2 times 15 is 30, times 8 is 240. 2 times 10 is 20, times 8 is 160. And now I can add them all together. 300, 400, 500, 600, plus 40 and 60 is going to give me 700. And I cannot forget my units. This is centimeters squared. So I have here formula, work, and then answer. This is the proper way to solve these equations.